Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee Weather Show right here on my YouTube channel. Welcome to new subscribers that have been checking us out in the last few days. Nice to see you on board. And of course, our long list of regulars who jump on the pre-chat a couple of hours beforehand, and we get into conversations of all sorts. But today it seemed to be very much weather focused. So I asked them, what do we want to do first? So we've decided by consensus that it's the tropics we're going to do first, and then we're going to come back and do our weather here across the U.S. Now, the Pacific obviously has been busy. We've been talking about Hurricane Erik and what was Hurricane Flossie, now Tropical Storm Flossie. And Erik is passing south of the big island of Hawaii. On the satellite, you're going to notice a big difference from what this looked like yesterday and what it looks like today. So we'll get started here. We're also going to look at that, just the tropical waves, plural, in the Atlantic. One in particular has gotten some interest from the Hurricane Center, and we're going to talk about that. And I got some models up, and I'm going to get into the perils of using these models and even some of the hurricane models. But let's take a look at the wide shot here of the east and central Pacific. And in plain sight, you have Erik getting ready to pass south of the big island of Hawaii, and of course Flossie right behind it, moving right along to the west-northwest. Now, Erik is still technically a hurricane. I don't know for how much longer, because it does continue to weaken. You can see how it's getting to look rather ragged, getting elongated north-south on its track to the west-northwest. And take a look down to the south of Erik. There's a disturbance there well down to the south, but clouds are blowing off from south to north. So there is shear going on, and it is significant. Some of the higher cloud tops are getting blown away north of the Hawaiian Islands, and this is part of the what I would call the semi-permanent destructive upper air that sits out in that part of the Pacific that seems to kill these what look like imposing hurricanes, and then once they get inside of about 300 or 400 miles, they begin to fall apart. And as we pointed out the other day, ocean water temperatures out there aren't as warm as you might think. Once you get north of 15 north, the water temperatures are below a threshold that would support anything more than a Category 1 or 2 hurricane. And when you get up right near Hawaii, water temperatures close to the 80-degree mark right now. That's kind of right on the borderline to support a minimal hurricane or a strong tropical storm. So unless you have ideal upper air conditions, it's going to be very hard to maintain these systems as they move toward the west. Now, I have a loop, as it decided now to reload. So there it goes. But this is a close-up loop of Erik, and I want you to take a look on the western edge of this. In the last few frames, you can actually see what appears to be the circulation center getting somewhat exposed. The convective, the thunderstorms, the convection that is on the east side continues to get stretched out north to south. And then also notice from its position, as it is, the center is going to pass a couple of hundred miles south of the big island of Hawaii. And in Hawaii, the big island right now, you're just getting some clouds that are blowing away from southeast to northwest. But the shear conditions, the strong upper air winds are in play here, and the weakening process will continue. So outside of the surf, the impact to Hawaii is going to be minimal, as this is going to continue to take a track on to the west. This is the Hurricane Center's forecast. It's still a hurricane now, expected to become a tropical storm on the next advisory, and they maintained it as a tropical storm through Saturday morning, and then they weakened it to a depression and a remnant low as it turns out toward the northwest. Now, we also have Flossie, and Flossie being right behind it. It weakened yesterday because of strong wind shear. I'll go back to that satellite loop, and we'll take a look at Flossie here. Remember, yesterday that center was exposed. It looks a little less, it looks perhaps a little bit better organized during today. I think, from what I can see from this visible satellite picture, and that's that circulation that you see toward the lower right, yesterday was very clear that the circulation center had come out from the main convection. It doesn't appear to be the case now, and perhaps some convection is blown up around the center and it's a little more tucked in. There was some speculation from the Hurricane Center as to whether this might get back to hurricane status briefly. It might not. It's being steered along west-northwestward. There's an upper ridge to the north that's holding in place. And in fact, if you look at the clouds in the Pacific, if you go north of Flossie, past the low clouds, you can see the upper high, the anticyclonic turning that is going on here with the clouds moving north to south and then going east to west. So that's that strong Pacific ridge that's out there from off the west coast and actually extends past Hawaii, although there's a little bit of a weakness right in between near the north of the Hawaiian Islands along 160 degrees west. But this actually, Flossie has gained some latitude here, and it is sitting at 16 north and 133.2 west. The big island of Hawaii is at 155. So the Hurricane Center just kind of keeps it west-northwest as a tropical storm right through the cycle here, and then turns it more northwest as it approaches the big island of Hawaii. So you have a tropical storm passing about 180 or so miles, or close to 180 miles south of the big island of Hawaii. Later Sunday night into Monday morning, you're going to have a tropical storm, Flossie, if it's still maintaining tropical storm strength, passing probably about 90 or so miles to the northwest of the islands if this forecast verifies. And the forecasts haven't been too bad. They've been having to adjust them further south early on, but now they've kind of seemed to be holding their own lately, so there's no particular reason why we should think that this is going to behave any differently. The only thing I would say is that if Flossie winds up weakening a bit faster, it might favor a bit more of a westerly course rather than that turn toward the northwest, as it responds to the low-level winds in terms of the steering. So that's something we'll look for to see if that's going to happen down the road. Now, on to the systems of interest in the Atlantic, and we've got a couple. Actually, we've got probably three of them. So we'll take a look at them one by one. So starting off with the one that is has the most attention from the Hurricane Center is, if you look in the tropical Atlantic, there's a lot of disorganized clouds and showers there northeast of Venezuela. If you go northeast of Venezuela and out into the Atlantic there, you can see the westernmost edge of the clouds. This is there is what looks like some kind of circulation there, very broad circulation. You've got clouds on one side going up from south to north, clouds on the other side going from north to south, but you don't have any convection near what would probably where the area of lowest pressure is. So you still have this sort of very broad looking low that is moving on a west or maybe slightly a west-northwest course. And the question, at least from the standpoint of the Hurricane Center, thinking that over the weekend, as it gets west of 50 degrees west, that it's going to come into an area where conditions are going to be a bit more favorable for development. One thing you're going to have to see in order for that to happen is if you look at where the islands are and go north and northeast of the islands, there's a long elongated area, probably some kind of mid-level or upper level trough here that runs from just north and east of those islands well up into the Atlantic. Now, that is going to probably create some wind shear issues. So that has to get that has to get out of the way in order to make sure that the upper level winds are going to be favorable. And if we look at the way the clouds are moving south of there, east of the islands, I'm not really seeing cloud tops being blown away to the north and northeast. So that probably says that the upper air winds here are a bit more relaxed, and that might give this lead wave an opportunity to develop into something. Now, right behind it, there's another wave that is south of the Cabo Verde Islands that seems to be fairly well defined, and yet behind that, if you look toward the African coast, let me make sure that the picture goes, yeah, you can see it, but there appears to be yet another wave getting ready to move off, and perhaps even one behind that. So clearly the intertropical convergence zone has migrated now to about 10 degrees north, and you're starting to see these tropical waves, these waves coming across Africa and moving out a bit further north than they were a couple of weeks ago. So now they're in a position that under the right upper air circumstances that you could see some tropical storm development out of this. Now, with respect to what may or may not happen here, my view on these things is you certainly wait till they form. There is no guarantee. The Hurricane Center does have a 70% chance of this developing into a tropical depression later in the weekend or early next week. But again, we have to acknowledge the fact that we've got this trough out in the Atlantic that's in the way. We've got some upper air wind issues that are going to be in the way. This may never wind up developing into anything more than a weak system. So I would be really cautious. I know it's all out there on the internet. You see it on social media. You've got all these weather models, and I'm going to show you a few of the models right now. But just be really careful when you look at these things, because you need a huge salt mine full of salt with a lot of these models, with the things that they do so early in the forecast period, and you're going out into the long range, 7 to 10 days or more. Now, here's the these are the hurricane the model track guidance, and you'll notice that except for a couple of outliers, most of them are clustered and take this pretty much on a west or west-northwest course right through the next 5 or 6 days, which seems to indicate that it would take some kind of surface low into the northeast Caribbean Sea. Now, I would suggest that if this is indeed the case, it's more likely to see a system that is weaker rather than stronger when it gets there. There's almost always an issue with tropical systems when they move into the eastern Caribbean with wind shear coming in off of South America. So that's another argument against having something of consequence with this particular disturbance. And the intensity guidance here, and by the way, this is great practice for me, and also great practice for you at home watching this, because you're going to see a lot more of these types of graphics, all courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, by the way. Great site where you can find all this stuff, and it's all free. But these intensity models, and there's a number of them, one of the things you'll notice is that quite a few of them actually strengthen this to a tropical storm in 48 hours from now. So we're talking, this is 2 p.m. today, so you're talking, according to this, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like 6 of the intensity models have this as a tropical storm by Saturday afternoon. I would probably lay odds, judging by what it looks like right now, that that's not going to verify. And also notice that you got a bunch of them actually strengthening this. You have 4 of them that strengthen this into a minimal hurricane by 84 hours. there are some models out there that are actually pretty aggressive with this, but I'm really kind of in this mode of you can sense by what I've been saying up through this point that you're going to have to really prove it to me that you're going to see this thing strengthen this quickly. There's too much out there that argues against it. Now here's another model that you got to be really careful with, and this is the HWRF model. If you click on Hurricane on Tropical Tidbits, you'll get a drop down, and these are all models: the HWRF, the HWRFP, and the HMON. Those are all models that work specifically with tropical systems. And here on the HWRF, you actually can see how you got this low, and this one only goes out 5.5 days. So we are at Saturday afternoon where we've got this 07 low. You can see the islands to the west, the leeward and windward islands, and then it just kind of takes it and turns it to the west. And now, according to this, you've got a deepening low that it has actually takes it to a 965 or a 955. Looks like a 965 pressure there in the last box next Tuesday. Again, prove it to me. The HWRF is notorious for doing this sort of stuff, where it just takes these waves and starts deepening them like mad. And again, prove it to me. As the HMON, which is another one that wants to deepen systems very aggressively. In fact, this one actually probably takes a little bit longer to get it to a tropical storm, which it has by Sunday, and then it takes it almost straight west, or just slightly north of due west, into, that's the butterfly-shaped island is the island of Guadeloupe. But it has it as a hurricane here. Again, you're going to have to prove it to me. Being that the European and the GFS model don't have this, okay? They have hints of it, but they don't have it. And I want to go back to last night, the 0Z GFS model run, because this is what really I thought was so funny when I saw it this morning. Okay, so I'm going to put it with the precip here. Last night, it got very aggressive here with this low. The first map here is for 2 a.m. Sunday morning, okay? And you'll take it west-northwest or west-northwest into the Northeast Caribbean as a tropical storm, moved it just south of Puerto Rico and over the Dominican Republic. Then it took it through the Bahamas and just off the Florida coast, where it sits it here. This is next weekend now. It sits it here as a hurricane, and a not too shabby hurricane either. And then it was starting from Saturday, and then here we are Monday night. So this is Saturday. This is actually Friday afternoon. Okay, this is Monday, Tuesday. So you're talking 4 days. 4 days that it sat there before it starts to inch it up just off the South and North Carolina coast and then south of Cape Cod, all right? And then the very next run, 6 hours later, nothing. Not only nothing, but you can barely find it. So this is why you can't, when you see these models and these shots that are put out about something that's in the long, long range, and you see them being blasted on social media in one form or another, and you read these, silly articles based on weather hysterics about stuff 10 days from now, it's a complete waste of time. And frankly, it does a great disservice to the general public when that happens, because by the time you write the article, the next model takes it away, and this was the next run. You can barely find it. There's probably a hint of it that goes into the Caribbean, and I think what the in-between run did was that it basically said that the system never develops. It stays very weak. You can see it here Monday morning. east of the southern leewards, and then you just kind of follow the kink on the isobar, and it's gone. So again, nothing here obviously is written in stone. Now, the other thing I want to show you is what's going on across the U.S., because I think that's really important in terms of the jet stream. We'll look at the latest model run. This is the new GFS. The old one had some system, the identity of a system that you could find for this wave, and it kind of took it offshore to the northeast. You can see where the isobar kind of kinks there, northeast of the leewards. That's how this run is handling it. And again, you could kind of find it east of the Bahamas, all that precip that you see east of the Bahamas, and then just sort of gets absorbed by the frontal boundary to the north. So this global model, the GFS, did absolutely nothing with it. The Canadian model, it's that speck right there on the Canadian model 8 days from now. So my point in all of this is that you're going to go through emotional roller coasters, taking a look at these models every 6 to 12 hours, and the best approach is really to just wait for the system to develop first. There may not be anything for this to work on if the upper air winds don't cooperate. And in fact, speaking of the upper air winds, let's just take a look at this off the Canadian model, and you can see what the issue is from where the low is. We're looking at wind shear from about 5,000 feet up to about 30,000 feet, and where you should be able to see where I'm going to put the cursor. You're going to see a latitude, longitude come up. Okay, so this is where roughly on Sunday afternoon you have this low center, and you'll notice that the colors are all showing average wind shear through that height, and you've got the yellows here, 25 to 30 knots of shear near the low center on the east side. On the north side, you've got 30 and 40 knots of shear going on, and that is going to be a problem. And I think that's what the models are keying on here, is the fact that the upper air winds may not be as favorable as you might think. Maybe it'll be enough to get a system going, but we talked about those clouds that run northeast of Puerto Rico. There's some kind of trough over there. If it doesn't get out of the way, you're going to have a real problem getting this to develop, and that shear actually continues and increases across the northeast Caribbean early next week. So this is probably the reason why the global models haven't really done very much with this on the last bunch of runs, because I think they have picked up on the fact that the upper air winds aren't exactly very good. Now, going forward, by the way, if you look at the Canadian, if it's right, gradually as we go through this forecast period past the 6th or 7th day out in the tropical Atlantic, it looks like you're seeing a much larger area of light wind shear in the white and blue, and a lot less of the brighter colors. So it looks like maybe that the wind shear profile in the tropical Atlantic is going to relax after next week, and perhaps that means that that's going to be bullish for development down the road. Now, the upper flow, let's assume that something does form. Okay, take a look at the upper air across the United States and across the North Atlantic. You have this persistent jet along the Canadian border, and we've been talking about how you get these troughs to come down and the jet drops southward, then it kind of flexes northward in between short waves. And here we are, Saturday evening. We've got an upper low in southeastern Canada with a trailing trough down into the Tennessee Valley. That's going to be the latest front coming through. But the point is, if you look at the upper air winds across the U.S., they go from the flow goes from North Dakota, South Dakota, through Missouri, down across the lower Gulf states, Alabama and Georgia, and then out east, almost east or east-northeast across to the Atlantic. You've got a fairly strong westerly flow across the Atlantic. It's almost like a ruler from North Carolina out toward the Azores. It's a straight line. So you don't have the kind of flow. You want to see these lines going from south to north, almost due south to due north, and you've got it at a 90-degree angle going from west to east. So the only other thing I would point out is that this east-west upper high, this narrow east-west upper high in the Atlantic, might force any system, even especially if it's a weak one, to just keep going west into the Caribbean, and then probably not developing. And in terms of the longer range next week, you'll notice there's a fairly deep trough in the east that's swinging through and drops in. That's fairly aggressive for this time of year. The westerlies go all the way down into South Carolina, and that just sits in eastern Canada, and it looks like another arm is getting ready to rotate. That's on the Canadian model. The latest GFS has a fairly aggressive jet stream pattern across the U.S. also. Trough lifts out, new trough drops in. I mean, it's hard to see how you're going to bring anything up the East Coast. When I say up the East Coast, I'm talking, say, from the Mid-Atlantic northward. With this type of a jet stream pattern, it's cold front after cold front after cold front. It is pretty amazing how the models just keep, very, very persistent here. And we're into mid-month now on the long range. So we're going to hold this pattern. Some of these shortwave troughs and the cold fronts with them are going to have some fairly decent shots of dry air coming on down. So now let's go back home and take a look at what's happening weather-wise as far as the next several days and beyond. We spent a lot of time on the tropics tonight, which is really a good thing. Okay, so I'm just going to roll back the new GFS, and I'm going to jump to the radar at the moment, because we do have, actually there's one other thing I want to look at. We do have some showers and thunderstorms going on in Florida today. They've actually diminished from where they were earlier. There was widespread activity across the state, and this is pretty well advertised, because you've got that frontal boundary off the East Coast, and now you've got this moisture that's coming up from the Bahamas. And here it is. This is the system that was in the Northeast Caribbean that brought heavy rains to Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Well, now we're seeing a lot of that disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity on the satellite loop over Florida and off the Florida East Coast. The Hurricane Center on their latest tropical outlook said that there's a 0% chance of this developing. And I kind of go along with that, because you've got this frontal boundary that's to the north. And I think all that's going to happen is that this stuff is basically you're going to probably get some kind of wave to develop on the front that's going to absorb all this moisture and take it on out to the northeast. So back home we go, and back to this radar. So a lot of activity today in the southeast U.S. You've got some lines and some clusters of very heavy thunderstorms from Louisiana northeastward through Georgia and Alabama and on up through the Carolinas. Some places are getting some pretty hefty downpours. Of course, our buddy Johnny Quest, who's on board tonight, dealing with his daily round of showers and thunderstorms in northwest Virginia as he heads for 1,000 inches of rain this year. Today in the northeast, we had a cluster form in southeast PA. That is all moving southward. You can see these storms dropping north-south down through southern Delaware and into Maryland, in the Maryland part of the Delmarva Peninsula. And there looks like there's a strong cell east of D.C. And dropping southward as well. That really was the extent of anything developing today. The Northeast has been absolutely quiet because we've got some dry air that's come down, and that's always a nice thing. We've got some severe weather risks going out in parts of the plains, and there's some showers and thunderstorms happening in Colorado, up through western Nebraska, and on up through the Dakotas, and also through parts of Montana, and getting a little bit of shower action going on off the coast of Southern California between Los Angeles and San Diego. You don't usually see that very often. Must be some kind of upper low that is sitting out there, but the rest of the state looks fairly dry. Okay, now we can go back to the map. So as far as the weekend is concerned, I think for the most part, for my area, which is eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, I think the vast majority of the time between now and Sunday should be okay. We've got this east-west high that builds into upstate New York tonight, so there's actually some dry air that has bled southward. I went out a little earlier and noticed that the humidity actually came off a little bit, and it felt a bit better out there. Most of the shower and thunderstorm activity from Virginia south into Alabama, as the radar indicated, and then you've got that frontal zone with the disturbed weather over Florida. It fires up again tomorrow. Looks like the northern extent pushes up into Pennsylvania, but for the most part, for New Jersey, north and east through New England, we should be okay. And then Saturday, well, you've got a wave that's going to try to develop on this front to the south. You also have another cold front that's dropping down from the north as the next short wave comes through, and it looks like the front is going to win the day. So that'll allow for, I think, decent weather conditions for New Jersey and Pennsylvania, north and east. Maybe an outside chance of a shower or thunderstorm on Saturday, and get this front that comes through during Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and it gets hung up a little bit because of the wave that's to the south and the frontal boundary that's to the south, but eventually that wave goes out. So we should have some decent weather developing for later Sunday into Monday. Now, still going to get some more rain, though, from Virginia on southward into Georgia and Florida going into next week. And it's really going to be a matter of cold front after cold front. There's a wave that comes up for Tuesday here that runs up the coast. I'm not 100% sold on this yet, but it seems like it wants to do that. The next front is dropping down, the next trough and short wave dropping down, and that moves out. Then you got yet another front, and that moves out, and yet another front in the long range, and that moves out, and yet another front in the long range, and on it goes. This has been a pattern that we've been locked into for such a long time. This started back in June, and through this month. Now, in spite of these fronts coming through, by the way, New York City just had its 10th warmest July on record, with temperatures finishing about 3 degrees above average. Honestly, I guess I've gotten used to the warmer, some of the warmer Julys that we've had. I mean, I certainly thought the month was warm enough, but I didn't think it was especially difficult to deal with. But it was the 10th warmest on record in New York City as measured in Central Park. Rainfall from WPC, always a good map. These guys do a really good job. The map really hasn't changed very much since yesterday, showing some big rains over the next 7 days over Florida of 5 inches or more in Central and South Florida on both coasts. You can see the brighter orange, which would be 5 to 7 plus, lies just offshore the Florida East Coast. You've got 2 to 3 inches of rain running up the coast to North Carolina and in through most of Virginia, Johnny Quest. Lesser amounts as you go to the north and east. And I think much of this is, of course, being convectively driven. There is going to be some variability in all of this. Still got that bullseye area in the plains. That continues with an area of 5-inch plus in northeast Oklahoma, southeast Kansas, and 2 to 3 inches or more rainfall amounts going up into Nebraska. Much of the west is okay. The Rockies down into the southwest getting their seasonal monsoon stuff. So you're seeing some productive showers and thunderstorms with some amounts up to a couple of inches. Again, that's all spread out over the next 7 days. And lastly, before I come on the chat, why don't we just bring up the U.S. satellite and take a look at that. So you can see all the weather in the southeast, the dry air that's over the Great Lakes and through upstate New York and New England. You seeing some high clouds and some blow off of some scattered thunderstorms that are up in Virginia down into southeast, that were in southeastern Pennsylvania, have now moved into Maryland. You can also see the action of the thunderstorms that are going on back through parts of the plains and in the Rockies, and of course a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity happening from earlier in Florida, but certainly a lot of clouds. This is not ideal weather conditions, aside from the fact that you've got temperatures that'll get up close to 90 every day regardless. But you've got to deal with all that rain in Florida this time of year. Not fun if you're a tourist visiting and you're looking for some nice weather conditions. Okay, back we are here at the chat board. And I just want to publicly just acknowledge Paul Broman, Johnny Quest, Chuck Cardillo, William Uber, and Scott Briller, the chairman, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Scott went out and played a little tennis, so he's going to watch us on a replay. But I really appreciate your generosity, and it gets me a couple of cigars and some coffee for the drive. Well, not coffee for the drive home, but maybe a soda or two for the drive home. Anthony Orr, one of our other resident statisticians here, is keeping an eye on the Hurricane Center to see if the new advisory is up. I'm just going to clean my my browser here to just have it work a bit better. I'm going to I'll have the Hurricane Center screen up and see if they've updated. I don't expect them to really say very much different here as far as the new outlook. Actually, the new outlook is pretty much the same as the old one, an elongated low-pressure system at 1,100 miles east of the Lesser Antilles, producing limited shower and thunderstorm activity. Slow development is expected during the next few days. While it moves west-northwest, tropical depression is likely to form several hundred miles east of the Lesser Antilles. Environmental conditions are now forecast to become less favorable for additional development by early next week as the system approaches the Lesser Antilles. I don't think they watch my show. Okay, I don't think so. 20% in 48 hours and 70% in 5 days. If it winds up not developing, this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of how you have to be really cautious with this stuff. And as far as the system in the Bahamas, significant development of this system is not expected before it merges with a front and accelerates northeast off the southeast U.S. coast by Sunday. Okay, so now I will come back to the chat board. You got a bullseye over you, Robert Brown. I guess because they got some big rains up there on WPC with some of these thunderstorms. That there's a cell, and also unless you're down in North Carolina right now, for sure, down that way, there's going to be some pretty hefty rains in the coming days. Timothy Veltman, I can't believe Spellcheck doesn't recognize I misspelled Chesapeake. C-H, yeah, you did. Okay, you did misspell it. And nice to see you on board, by the way. Yeah, nice. The outflow is definitely terrific. Oh, thanks so much, Timothy. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it. You managed to get, good for you. Congratulations on your race. I enjoy it. Thank you. This actually gets me some cigars for tomorrow night. So this is really good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it greatly. Doing that. It does go. You know what, folks? It actually goes a long way. And you know, I get a cigar or two, or maybe a fishing lure or two, and I get to relax. And I'm very thankful to those of you who have hit Super Chat from time to time. And I think now that we're coming up on a quarter to the hour, weather and low. Oh, I haven't seen you on in a while. I've heard rumors say we might have a hurricane threat. No, okay? The rumors, okay? The social media rumors, the hysterics, the hysteric posters, okay? No. You don't deal with anything until it forms, okay? That's the rule. You can speculate about it, you can look at the models, and you can have your weather opinion about what's going to happen, but to pull up something off a map and suddenly, take it as being written in stone is just, it's ridiculous. And that actually, to be quite frank, is not weather forecasting. That's for the hurricane lovers and the storm lovers, it would be a form of wish casting, okay? And we don't do that here. So beware, you're going to see stuff flying in the next 2 months, and you can always come here for a sensible forecast outlook and a weather view. Okay, we'll always tell you I'll always tell you what I think is happening with regards to the meteorology, the models, and everything else. You'll never get any, you'll never get and never have gotten any kind of wish casting on this channel. Mr. Nappy, Jason Nappy, my buddy, who's at put down, type in where your station is. Okay, Jason is working in Lafayette, Louisiana, where he's already, he's barely started working, got baptized by fire, and dealt with Barry, which was survivable. You got a lot of rain out of it, but God knows in Louisiana you've seen a lot worse than that. And yes, Robert Brown, definitely no more Florences. You don't want a situation where we get another tropical system that stalls out. And 10 tornadoes in 5 hours. So put your station call letter. So if anybody's down in Lafayette, Louisiana, be sure to watch my buddy Jason Nappy, who just started there. When I started first in New Orleans back in 1986, I also had baptism by fire because I had barely been there 3 weeks. I'd started at the end of November. And the main meteorologist, Bob Breck, who's retired now, lucky you, Bob. He left for a 2-week vacation around Christmas and New Year's, and I had to deal with record floods, okay, incredible heavy rains, which was followed by some of the coldest air that they've ever seen in Louisiana. I believe when we got into New Year's, I think the temperatures did get down into the single digits, if I remember correctly. It was horrible. I mean, it was horrible and it wasn't. Because when you work in TV, believe it or not, baptism by fire is probably the best way because you have to focus on what's going on. So that's what you do. And you're starting at a new station, you're nervous, you want to make a good impression. You're young, especially if you're young. I was at the time. I only had about 2 years on air experience when I was hired there. So, baptism by fire was the best thing that could have happened to me because that's all I did was had to focus on the weather. And it was a wonderful 3 years that I had in New Orleans before I came back into the New York area. What have you been, Johnny Quest? I can't imagine you being banned from anything. What did you get banned from? I'm curious. If you don't get a chance to answer, just message me because I can't find the other end. Here you go. Timothy Veltman said, only engage the hype casters if you wish for them to ban you from their social media platform, says Timothy Veltman. They're doing you a favor if they ban you, okay? Because you don't have to go there and waste your time with the hype casters, as Mark G aptly describes. I still haven't gotten a day off since the hurricane. Are you kidding me? Seriously? You haven't had a day off? Time to get a day off, Jason. If a tropical system, Stephen Franco, my Long Island buddy, if a tropical system eventually were to come through our area, would it change our jet stream pattern in terms of cooler weather? Probably. And the thing is, Stephen, you saw how that jet stream was set up pretty much northwest to southeast. You have to have a deep trough south to north, so to get a southerly flow along the east coast. So on the west side of that trough, especially as you get deeper into, you start getting into September, you would see something like this, where a trough along the east coast, if it's a north-south deep trough, you're going to have cool air from Canada being drawn down on the west side. So the deeper the trough, the deeper the trough that you're going to see, you're going to have more of a contrasted air mass. And of course, if you're riding a tropical system on the east side, you are going to bring down what could be significantly cooler and drier air on the west side. It's part of the atmospheric process of basically just cleaning everything up. Jason Nappy, you're very kind to say that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You know I'm always there for you, buddy. If you ever need me, you can text me. You got my number, and you got a nice long future ahead of you, which is a good, definitely a good thing. Okay, let's wrap it up here at this point. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here tonight. Really enjoyed getting into some tropical stuff. So now I got my head together. So when we have something really to deal with, we will deal with it. Southeast of Flossie, I pulled the map off. There is, David Schwartz. Nice to see you on board tonight. Another thank you, big thank you to you for Super Chat. 3 cigars for me tomorrow and 3 cigars for me tonight. Thank you so much. You guys have been really kind tonight. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what's southeast of Flossie? There is actually another area of disturbed weather out in the Pacific that has a shot at becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the next 5 days, but I didn't really give it a close look. With those 2 storms front and center, I didn't want to start speculating on a third at this point, especially in the East Pacific side where the vast majority of them die out long before they get anywhere. Even if they make it as far west as Hawaii, you can certainly see what the outcome is with these storms. All right, so let's wrap it up here. It's coming up on 7:50 Eastern Time. It was a great night tonight. We're going to live stream tomorrow night. Joe Rayo is off tomorrow night, so I got double duty. But we're going to live stream tomorrow night as we take a look at the tropics and go into the weekend. So we'll probably do it at it's a Friday night. So maybe I might shoot for 6 o'clock Eastern Time. But you'll know. I'll post it early. You'll get a notification of what time it is. Or if you're on Patreon, you will. I always let the Patreon folks, I put a post up a couple of hours before. And the chat board, by the way, always opens up a good 2 hours before the live stream begins. Now, just very quickly, I'll put the link up on the chat. I do have my weather platform on Patreon. It's a subscription platform for just $2 a month. The link is up there on the chat. And I'm going to be doing additional coverage just on Patreon this hurricane season that you're not going to see on Facebook or on Twitter or on my website. I'm going to be doing stuff that's going to be focused just for Patreon members, along with other stuff that we do that is not necessarily showing up on the website. So the link is there. It's just $2 a month, and that actually goes a long way to help me with all the stuff I got with my app and websites and everything else. And by the way, speaking of my weather app, the update is in on Google. So if you have the app downloaded on your phone and you have an Android device, that the app should update. If not, force an update. There are a couple of changes. One is that now when you go to your local forecast page, it will default to your own location. You don't have to manually put it in anymore. And also, if you're on Long Island, Mark G. You're a South Shore in Massachusetts. Okay, I'm sorry. I saw South Shore. I didn't see the rest of that. But anyway, if you are on Long Island, I added a Long Island tab, so there'll be stuff specifically posted for Long Island on a daily basis. And you'll get a notification of that when a new post goes up, along with the regular notifications of posts and videos which you can watch. So by all means, if you haven't downloaded it, by all means do. The same update is going to the iPhone. It's just that Apple kind of takes its time about doing stuff. So last I checked, it was not yet on the iPhone devices, the update. The app is there, but it hasn't updated yet, but it should do so shortly. So just look for that. And again, go to Google Play or the App Store to download my free weather app, which is Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or just search Joe Chaffee and it will come up. So live stream tomorrow. Look for website posts. You got Patreon. And one other thing is if you shop on Amazon, you can do it via my link, which you don't have to buy what's on this, on this page that comes up, but you use the search bar and you do your Amazon shopping, and Amazon will throw me back a little bit of coin out of their pocket. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So you've got the Amazon link in the chat. There's an Amazon link on the descriptor to this live stream, descriptor to this video. Thank you very much for those of you who have used it. It's really easy to do, doesn't cost you an extra cent, and I get a couple of cigars and some fishing lures, Amazon throwing me back a little bit of coin. Keith James, you just hopped on. We've been on since 7:05, so we've been on for 50 minutes. So we're just saying goodnight. So listen, sorry, gotta go. We'll see you tomorrow, and if the tropics look like they're going to get active this weekend, I may sneak a live stream or two. Oh, and don't forget, in the morning, Weather in 5 on my YouTube channel or on Facebook, 5 days in 5 minutes, and we'll give you a brief synopsis of what we expect to happen, and we'll touch on anything that's going on in the tropics. That's on Weather in 5. Good night.